Mark? Good. Fine.
Easy? Okay, well, I think it's that easy. It's just that it's recording, so I will keep my fingers crossed that all is going well. So,
okay. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you're ready to start, we have someone here, my supervisor, the Associate Solicitor for the Division of Administration, would like to give a brief introduction and introduce you, and we can start after that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, great. Well, welcome everybody to our continuing series of EEO and diversity training. Before I introduce our guest speaker, to also express some thanks to some individuals who helped provide us our chili this morning, and in particular, Lori Jarman, sitting to my right, also Kim Benton, Calistine Adams, and Carmen Carter. If you not quite sure what the tie-in to chili was in relation to today's topic, maybe our guest speaker will be able to explain that a little better than I could. But without further ado, I want to introduce Enemini Ekong. I hope I'm pronouncing that well enough. Enemini is the Chief of Education and Interpretation, Education, and Cultural Resources at the Brown versus Board of Education National Historic Site in Topeka, Kansas. Since joining the National Park Service, he's worked at various locations, including the Little Rock High School National Historic Site, Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site here in D.C., the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, and has served in a number of learning and development and youth mentoring roles. Enemini earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in History from Baylor University in Texas, and a Master of Arts degree in African American Studies from Morgan State University in Baltimore. So let's welcome Enemini to our program, and look forward to hearing your observations and education on the Brown versus Board of Education site.
Well, good morning, or I guess for you all on Eastern Standard Time, good afternoon. My name, as shared, is Enemini Ekong. You all can refer to me as Ranger E, as they do in the park, should you have any questions throughout the presentation. As always, it is a utmost pleasure to share this history with you all in hopes of having a very relevant discussion of why this history even matters. Why should we even be concerning ourselves with this history today? So I'll preface this presentation by saying that there is so much to cover with this story alone that I've tried to cherry pick some of the highlighted points that would perhaps give enough context for us to see, at least from a bird's eye view, what went on, some of the effects, ramifications, and what have you. And I'll go over my objectives here shortly, but I just wanted to let you all know that you're welcome to ask questions that don't have much to do with the presentation, just because of the magnanimous, I guess, coverage of this particular point in history. So, with that being said, I hope that by the end of this presentation, you're able to say who are the Little Rock Nine, when it occurred, where it took place, hint, hint, Little Rock Nine, who was involved, what it accomplished, and why we should care today. Out of just sheer curiosity, how many people are in attendance today?
We have about 15 or so in the main conference room, and about another little less than 10 on the phone, so probably 25 or so folks.
That is good to know. So for starters, I want to talk about the history of Central High. So in Little Rock, those who were in legislation in the early 1920s anticipated that Little Rock would serve as the New York of today, so to speak. The legislators in Little Rock and those who were building the city knew that one of the best ways to get big business is to have the best schools. And so they had the foresight that when they built schools, business and enterprise would come. And so Little Rock had always, at that point in time, been known for its progressive thought, and given that it was in the middle of the country, it was, though it was south, it wasn't too south for some. And so in 1927, what was then called Little Rock Senior would put aside $1.5 million to build this school that you see before you. Now, $1.5 million seems like perhaps chump change today, but it probably would have been equivalent to $26.7 million today. So when you think about if there were a school in your community right now that said, hey, we're setting aside $26.7 million to build a school, you would have perhaps some questions as to why, where are we going, where are we getting that money, what are the taxes on the citizens? And so all that said, we'll talk a little bit more about how $1.5 million was set aside, but this is the school, once again, kind of breaking ground in 1927. I probably should have put parental advisory for the brief nudity, but this would have been the Central High basketball team in 1928. So after breaking ground in 1927, in 1928, they have a full functioning school. Central High was always well known for its football team, not so much its basketball team, but I wanted to try and give as much of a visual context to what areas of the school I could best speak to. These gentlemen are standing on what would, should anyone ever go to the physical location of Little Rock Central High, which, by the way, Little Rock Central High is the only national park in the country that is actually a functioning school. Today, Little Rock Central is housing anywhere from about, at least when I was last there, 2,596 students. And I want to say they had, at the time that I left, a 93.6 percentile graduate rate. And I want to say for the most part, they averaged about 24 merit scholars annually. So, but once again, we can address those more relevant today questions. But so this is the basketball team. This would have been the graduating class of 1928. If you're noticing probably the underlying message here, there is not much diversity in this picture. I really want to note that this 1928 Little Rock is setting a precedent for what we'll talk about. I'm sorry. So these are the cheerleaders. Definitely needed cheerleaders for their renowned football team that had a pretty good tradition of going to state. And so wanted to show this map for those of you who attended my previous webinar, I wanted to really kind of zero in on segregation by color. And so once again, in the red states, that was absolute segregation. And in the yellow states, there was not so much. In the blue states, there was just no affirmative legislation that said that they were or they weren't. And for the green, there was supposed that there wasn't any segregation. So the red states are really what we're focusing on, because right above Texas, you see Arkansas. So going back to what I said about the $1.5 million, the $1.5 million was set aside for the all-white Little Rock Senior High School. The Paul Lawrence Dunbar School, which was built 2 years later. So Little Rock Central gets established in 1927. 2 years later, they built Paul Lawrence Dunbar High, right? Because there's African-American students that need to go to high school, but they can't go to Little Rock Senior High. And so after, I guess, putting together $67,500 from individuals who had fundraised and donated, and an additional $30,000 that came from the Rockefeller Foundation, Rockefeller General Education Fund. We then get the Rosenwald Fund that helps match the Rockefeller General Education Fund, and the all-black high school, Paul Lawrence Dunbar, is built with $400,000. So if you were to go to Little Rock today and look at both of the schools, they look almost like a spitting image of one another, with the exception that Paul Lawrence Dunbar is a third of the size. The Little Rock Senior High takes up about 27 acres. It has traditionally received, and at one point in our country was considered the most beautiful high school on the globe, and has still remained and highly touted as one of the most beautiful high schools in America by our architectural firms and what have you, who have spoken highly about the I want to say it's Roman Greco. I'm definitely butchering that, but the mirroring of the Oxford-like, Princeton-like building of the school is what Little Rock really becomes renowned for. It houses 3,000 students. They had 100 classrooms. The teachers were, as they are today, some of the most well-educated, most well-trained. They had state-of-the-art football stadium, state-of-the-art labs, you name it. And the salaries, of course, weren't too much to bat an eye at, with getting $500 a month. And then you see the comparison with Paul Lawrence Dunbar High. Every year after Central was done with their football equipment, with their books, with their lab equipment, they would give it to Paul Lawrence Dunbar High. And actually, I spoke out of turn, because Paul Lawrence Dunbar did not have a laboratory. Even if they gave them their supplies, they really couldn't utilize them. And this is set up in 1927, 1929, the dichotomy of Little Rock. So now, my trivia question for this training is, why were they called the Little Rock Nine? Why do these 9 African Americans get coined with the term Little Rock Nine? And I'm sorry if anybody online is attempting to answer. I can't see. But if I can take somebody who is courageous to take a stab at why they were called the Little Rock Nine.
Because there were 9 of them, and they were from Little Rock.
That is the correct answer. Yeah, that was in part because little is known that there, originally, after the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case in 1954, the Aaron versus Cooper case comes out in 1955, and on May 24, 1955, there is what's called the Blossom Plan. And this is, Virgil Blossom was the superintendent of the Little Rock School District. And the Blossom Plan was to gradually integrate all Little Rock high schools, beginning in high school, and then making its way to the lower grades over the next 6 years. Well, the federal judge, John E. Miller, dismisses the NAACP lawsuit, the Aaron versus Cooper, declaring that Little Rock has to act with utmost good faith in setting a plan for gradual integration, and basically mandates that the Blossom Plan take effect sooner than later. So then we make our way to August 27, 1957, and there is a segregationist Mothers League of Central High School that's holding public meetings, and they're saying, you know, this should not happen. This should not happen. So there is an all-black high school that at Paul Lawrence Dunbar High, Horace Mann is a school that ultimately gets built 1955-56. And once the Supreme Court case of Brown versus Board comes down, there's a very hurried angst to build a brand new black high school, almost to serve as a deterrent to integration. So Horace Mann High School, which becomes the all-black high school in 1956, gets built with the sole intent to defer integration in Little Rock, but in its most progressive way, because individuals in Little Rock want to be able to say, well, why would you want to integrate our all-white high school when we just built you a brand new high school, right? Separate but equal, in a sense, is where they're still thinking. And so the students all throughout the black high schools are asked, which one of you want to attend Little Rock Central High? And so the process of integration begins. And so initially you have somewhere in the ballpark of 250 to 300 African American students who are thoroughly interested in going to Little Rock Central High. In the Virgil Blossom Plan, there was only anticipated that about 250 would integrate that first year. Well, after they figure out that there's about 300 who are willing to integrate Little Rock Central, they then go through the process of grade checking. So they want the best and the brightest. And so they begin the weeding out process. If you're a B or C student, you can't go to Little Rock Central. So they whittle it down to a couple of, I'll say about 100 or a little bit under 100. And then they begin to do character tests. What is your behavioral track record? Even if you're a BA student, we want to know that you've never been in any altercations, that you wouldn't incite anything. And so they whittle the cadre of students down even more. They get it down to about 17 students. And, or rather, before they get it down to, they get it down to about 17 students, and they then decide, well, let's publish these students' names in the newspaper along with their home addresses. So you can only imagine that after having these names published in the newspaper, more dwindled down. They then went through psychological tests. And after doing all of this, they had 10 students who had made it through the vetting process. So when we get to the first day of school, which is September 4th, actually before we ever get to the first day of school, Governor Orville Faubus, who is up for re-election, and he's going up against a staunch segregationist. And the only reason why I bring this up, and this is once again just so much of a robust story that there are so many aspects that we could delve into, Governor Orville Faubus, because he's running for re-election against the segregationists, begins what some would historically say playing politics. So he is a politician at heart, and so he knows that if he's going to win the vote in this year's upcoming election, he has to do something to stand out from his competitor. And so on September 2nd, Labor Day, Governor Orville Faubus orders that he orders that the National Guard would prohibit African Americans from actually being able to get to the school. Now, he doesn't outright say that, but he comes over the national broadcast and he says that he's sending out the National Guard to maintain order. What that is language for is that he wanted to maintain what had always been maintained: racial respectability, segregation. And so on September 3rd, there's a sunrise service, and the Mothers League, Central High, and members of the Citizens Council and parents, they all aim to make sure that integration does not happen. So September 4th rolls around, and it is the first day of school. And this is the scene on the first day of school. The Daisy Bates, who is one of the key players, and there are a lot of key players. There's Daisy Bates, her husband L.C. Bates. Thurgood Marshall was working with the legal counsel in Little Rock, and Daisy Bates was the first female African-American president of the NAACP state chapter in the state of Arkansas. And so one of the reasons why they choose Little Rock as their next means to move the needle of equality in our country is because, as I've shared with you, the idea that there was $1.5 million put into this school and all of the grand amenities that this school had, for those who are African American in Little Rock Central represented what then would have been noted as white privilege. And so one of the reasons why Little Rock, out of all the schools in the country, because there were actually schools within the state of North Carolina and Virginia who were better equipped to integrate on such a national level. But Little Rock was known as a very progressive city. And particularly because Little Rock Central had been so notable in its time, they figured that if any example of how integration should look for the rest of the country, it needed to be Little Rock. And so Daisy Bates serves almost as a surrogate parent to the Little Rock Nine. And on September 3rd, she calls up all the children all the African-American children who will be integrating on that day. And just to go back, the gentleman to the far left is Ernest Green. He'll be the only senior. The next is Priscilla Beals, and she actually is responsible for a renowned book that gives insight into the Central experience known as Warriors Don't Cry. The next gentleman is Terrence Roberts. Then there's Kalata Walls, and the lady right beside her is actually Daisy Bates. She looks young enough to be one of the Little Rock Nine, but she's the 10th person in the picture, but that is Daisy Bates. She is also, just another historical fact, the only African-American female to speak at the March on Washington in D.C. in 1963. Making our way to the last gentleman, to the, I guess you can say to the right of Daisy Bates is, I just had a brain fart, Jefferson Thomas. And Jefferson Thomas, out of the Little Rock Nine, is the only one who is still not living. In 2010, he will pass away from pancreatic cancer, and he was also a Vietnam veteran, and so while there hasn't necessarily been a link to his cancer and his noble service for our country, it has often been that those veterans who have come back from Vietnam were oftentimes associated with Agent Orange, for those of you who have veterans in your family. The lady sitting on right under Ernest Green is Thelma Mothershed, and she is one of the 2-9 who actually still resides in Little Rock and so frequently goes to the school, does speaking engagements. The young lady sitting beside her is our chili lady. This is Minnie Jean Brown Tricky. And then beside her is, Gloria Ray Callmark is on the other end, and the young lady in the middle, I am going to recall here shortly. Okay, so I will definitely come back, but for whatever reason, I'm having a brain fart. Making our way back to the first day. So September 4th, September 3rd, Daisy Bates calls up all the children who are supposed to integrate that day and says, we need to meet at my house in order for us to show a united front. And so the Little Rock 9 show up at our house, and she will be escorted with 4 individuals of the clergy, 2 white and 2 black. And so they'll meet at her house, and together they'll make their way to the school in order to try and make it in as a united front. They are met by the National Guard only to not get in. And this is the scene that you see. Now, right behind Gloria Ray Callmark, you'll see a young lady who's towering above her. That is Jane Hill. Jane Hill was the 10th student who shows up on that first day. And unfortunately, after this first day, Jane Hill won't come back due to her parents saying, no, there is absolutely no way that we'll allow you to go to school and receive some of the treatment that was seen nationwide. Now, this is Elizabeth Eckford, whom was the one lady's name whom I could not recall until now. So I do apologize. The young lady, I'll just go back real quick. The young lady right here in the middle with the glasses is the most renowned Elizabeth Eckford. And this is known as the walk. So when Daisy Bates called all of the students on September 3rd, she unfortunately overlooked Elizabeth Eckford. And part of the reason why she overlooked Elizabeth Eckford was because Elizabeth Eckford didn't have a telephone. And so when Daisy Bates had gone through her list of calling individuals, she did not get in contact with Elizabeth Eckford. And like any 15-year-old, there's a lot of anxiety before that first day of school, particularly the first school where she may not know everyone. She's not going to her all-black high school where she would have known students from the prior years. So she prepares like she would any other day that she would going to Horace Mann. She actually sews the dress that she's wearing, sews it, lays it out. She's nervous, doesn't get too much sleep the day prior. When she wakes up on September 4th, she collects her belongings, puts on her nice little shades, and hops on the public bus. She gets dropped off at the stop sign, and she starts to make her way to school, as she would any other day. Her mom would have been a teacher at the local deaf and blind school, which was about anywhere from about, I'll say, 7 to 10 minutes away from Little Rock Central. And she makes her way and notices that there's a lot of commotion, like there's a lot of chanting going on towards the school. And I wish I had a better picture to better walk you through the experience, but she attempts to make her way in the side of the building. But unfortunately, the National Guard have created almost a man-made barricade where she saw white students who were making their way between the National Guard soldiers to get into the school on the side of the building, and so she tries to follow suit. And as she does, two National Guardsmen kind of butt their shoulders together to prevent her from walking through. And so she's a little perplexed, and so she attempts to go thinking, okay, perhaps these soldiers are having a bad day. Let me try and make it through another set of soldiers. And so she attempts, but then is blocked again. There's a classic photo, if you were ever to go to the site, of a National Guardsman then pointing to his right, which is the middle of the road, but it's the front of the school. So Elizabeth Eckford at this point feels like she's reached an epiphany. She's like, oh my goodness. The reason why they're not letting me go in the side of the school is because I have the privilege of going through the front doors. And so she begins to walk down the main road leading up to the center of the school and the front doors, only to better hear the commotion that was going on in the background. And that commotion was a chant of 2-4 that she could hear in the distance when she had just gotten off the bus. And as she walked closer, 2-4-6. By the time she gets to the soldiers and she's told to make her way to the front of the school, the chants have now become 2-4-6-8. We don't want to integrate. There's a historical mobile station, a gas station that sits right across from the school, and that would have been the epicenter for everything journalism. And I give extreme appreciation for those who were in journalism of the day, because they make our history what it is today. If not for those who were chronicling our history through journalism, there's no way we would have this photo. William Counts is an undercover journalist who would be at the mobile station. Whenever Elizabeth Eckford makes her way up the road, she has to pass the mobile station, and at that point, everything journalism goes berserk. They're like, oh my gosh, the first African-American student is here. The first African-American student is here. And they bum rush Elizabeth Eckford, and they're asking her, you know, why are you coming to this school? Where are the other African-Americans? Why don't you go to your school? And at this point, Elizabeth Eckford hasn't been trained on how to respond to this. The other 8 students, or rather the other 9 students, including Jane Hill, have not yet arrived, and so she is actually the first to ever arrive to Little Rock Central. And as she's making her way up the road, this crowd begins to engulf her. You'll see the young lady with her face scrunched. This is Hazel, and Hazel will spend her life living down this photo. She is caught in the middle of the phrase that she's yelling at Elizabeth Eckford, go back to Afra, and they take the picture when she says, go back to Africa. Elizabeth Eckford, in most of her, and I've had the pleasure of meeting 7 of the 9, Elizabeth Eckford being one of them, she recalls being able to look around and see women whom she would have seen on Sunday going to church. And one of the things that stuck out to Elizabeth is that these were ordinary people. These were people that she saw on a regular basis. This neighborhood, also known as the Centennial neighborhood that surrounds Little Rock Central High, was known as a salt and pepper neighborhood. Unlike most southern cities, Little Rock had African Americans living right next door to whites in this Centennial neighborhood. It wasn't very uncommon for you to see a doctor or a janitor of different colors, races, and hues within this neighborhood, but for some reason today, their disposition was very different. Elizabeth Eckford will make her way a very, very long walk to a bus stop on the other side of the road, and that's because she gets barred from going in the front of the school. And it's halfway through her walk that she hears someone yell, "Get a rope." And if you were to be in front of the school, there is a huge, I want to say oak tree that has very, very sturdy limbs, and there would have been stuffed kind of mannequins that would have been hanging from the trees as some of the crowd were just kind of literally letting their sentiment be known about what they thought about integration. Many of them were outsiders, and that becomes a different narrative just of what the city of Little Rock becomes known as, because the history that's told of Little Rock for many Little Rock citizens isn't very fully representative of the Little Rock citizens, given that there were so many outside perpetrators. But that said, halfway through her walk, Elizabeth Eckford hears someone yell out, "Get a rope." And it's at that point that her fear for her life, beyond just the crowd that's consuming her, goes exponentially through the roof. She looks at a lady whom she said had beautiful blue eyes and had a very kind face, only for that mother to spit in her face. By the time Elizabeth Eckford makes it to the bus stop, she will have been fully soaked with spit, and she will wait for the bus to make her way to her mother's job about 7 or 10 minutes away. And one of the heroines is a journalist by the name of Benjamin Fine. Benjamin Fine comes up to her while she's on at the bus stop and lets her know, he whispers in her ear and he says, "Whatever you do, don't let them see you cry." And it's at that point that Benjamin Fine is accosted and calls all sorts of names for putting his arm around a young African-American girl. There's another lady by the name of Grace Lorch who had a long history of activism, who actually sits with Elizabeth Eckford throughout her wait for the next bus to ensure that she gets on the bus safely, and she actually accosts the crowd. A white woman who is basically shaming these grown adults and saying, you know, "How dare you," and basically comes to her aid. So this picture is of the Little Rock 9 that arrived after Elizabeth Eckford. The reason why that's important is because Daisy Bates, in all of the participation that she has in the civil rights movement, the only day that she is notably known for actually breaking down and crying is when she found out that Elizabeth Eckford had to endure this on her own, and because of some responsibility that Daisy Bates takes. So the Little Rock 9 will then attempt a second time on September 14th to enter the school, and they won't get in. They'll actually make their way into the school, and upon getting news that the Little Rock 9 have entered the school, there are white students who are actually jumping out of the second floor windows because of their fear of being touched or being in the same vicinity of an African-American student. And the crowd of about what started as maybe 200 to 300 on September 4th, the first day, has now kind of ballooned to about 1,000 individuals out in front of the school. And as Governor Orville Faubus has now been contacted and told, yeah, you need to let the 9 in the school. September 14th, the students will get into the school, but Governor Orville Faubus, he'll actually, instead of having the National Guard that was there on September 4th, will only have have the local police that are expected to hold back the crowd, which was substantially less than the National Guard. And whenever the crowd outside hears that the Little Rock Nine on September 14th have entered the school, on September 23rd, that they've entered the school, the crowd will become irate and start testing the law enforcement. And it gets to a point to where one of the members of the crowd said, just let us have one. If we can just get one, we'll go home. And over the intercom, another cop can hear one of the officers say, which one? It is at that point that the Little Rock Nine are shoved into a patrol car, and they leave out the side of the building, and the officer driving the patrol car is ordered to drive and not stop at any stop signs or any traffic signs. And Melba Patilla-Beals will say often in interviews that she's had that what made her most fearful was the fear that she saw in law enforcement, that she could see the white in his knuckles as he was gripping the steering wheel as they shot out of the side of the building. So at this point, President Eisenhower has been President Eisenhower has contacted and has communicated with Governor Orville Faubus. That's what occurred on September 14th. I apologize for mixing up my dates. He actually invites Governor Orville Faubus to his retreat home in Newport, Rhode Island, and says, hey, you know, this isn't looking good. You know the law of the land. Brown versus Board has passed in 1954. You all have created this Blossom Plan. I need you to allow these students to get into the school. September 24th comes about. They get into school, but of course, once again, there's fear, and the tactic of Governor Orville Faubus to take the National Guard from adequately protecting the students then becomes a challenge to a general who had quite a pedigree in World War II. And so he decides, if it is to be, it's up to me. And he sends a message, not just to simply turn over the National Guard, federalize the National Guard, but he sends 1,200 paratroopers overnight to ensure that the Little Rock Nine integrate this Central High. Whenever he does that, this sends a resounding message. I could really go into meaty details of the reality that in between September 4th and September 25th, when the Little Rock Nine actually entered the school, President Dwight Eisenhower is receiving a lot of calls from civil rights organizations, Martin Luther King, various individuals who are interested in how this is going to come about, that these 9 students don't get to exercise the 14th Amendment. I'll also put, just as another contextual note, with this being in 1957, Little Rock is approximately 198 miles away from Money, Mississippi. The only reason why this is important is because 2 years prior to the Little Rock Nine trying to integrate Central High, the Emmett Till story of a 15-year-old who is basically beaten up and thrown in the river is a story that is well known by the Little Rock Nine. They're also extremely familiar with the Montgomery bus boycott that has just successfully completed its 381-day protest in Montgomery, Alabama. And so they understand to a certain degree what they're up against, but don't think that of all places, Little Rock would be a Montgomery, Alabama, or a Birmingham, also known as Birmingham, Alabama. And so September 25th, the Little Rock Nine make their way into the school, And if you read any American history book, those are the 3 lines that conclude this story, that the Little Rock Nine on September 25th, 1957, enter Little Rock Central High, period. But for the Little Rock Nine, that's where the story began. After they enter the school, each one of them is escorted daily by a member of the National Guard. And it is for the first 3 months that there are I want to say 42 complaints given by the Little Rock Nine of different forms of harassment. They had their lockers were peed in, there were thumbtacks put in their seats. Ernest Green remembers having his gym class and taking a shower, and after, kind of sudsing up his face and washing off his face, he was getting ready to exit the shower only to find out that he had to walk through a bed of glass that had been broken. Melba Patillo Beals will have acid thrown in her face. This was acid that was actually created in the chemistry lab with a chemistry teacher. They will speak very candidly about there were so many silent witnesses that in a school of about 1,800 students, there was only 50 to 100 of those students who participated in what many of the Nine called their terrorism. But the 1,700 who stood by and watched were, in a large part, accomplices to what many of them experienced. So there was a regulation that the Nine had to adhere to. Part of the psychological test and the vetting that the Little Rock Nine did in order to attend Central High is that each one of them were told that if you go to this high school, you cannot, under any circumstances, retaliate. For many African-American parents who would have made the process, one parent who was about 5'5" and had very short children said, well, I know for a fact my children can't go to this school because I've taught them to fight back. And so each one of the Little Rock Nine was told, if you attend this school, you cannot retaliate physically or verbally, and in addition, you cannot participate in any extracurricular activity. So they were strictly students. They couldn't play sports, which was another means of weeding out those 300 students who knew that they wanted to go to Central High because of its great academic and athletic programs, is that they wouldn't be able to participate. Minnie Jean Brown, who loves drama, always wanted to make her way to Broadway, wanted to sing, could not be on the drama team. And so with this in mind, the 50 to 100 students out of the 1,800 who knew that these 9 students could not retaliate, antagonized and terrorized on so many levels. Minnie Jean Brown became the target for many students because, as one white student said, she walked the halls as if she belonged there. Minnie Jean had a very charismatic personality where she was unfazed in many cases, or at least demonstrated that she was unfazed by the bigotry that would go on around her. In one instance, Minnie Jean Brown, in the early, well, in the, I'll say late fall, is being followed by these three young ladies, all who are white. They're calling her names, they're kicking her heel, almost to the point to where she has now received bloody blisters on the back of her heels, kind of stepping on the back of her heels. One of the three gets so fed up that Minnie Jean is doing such a good job ignoring her that she ends up putting 6 combination locks into a small clutch purse. And after being so frustrated that she can't break through Minnie Jean Brown's even-keeled demeanor, she throws the 6 combination locks at the back of Minnie Jean Brown's head, which definitely dazes Minnie Jean. And after she gathers herself, she picks up the clutch, drops the clutch in a nearby trash can, turns around and says, "You poor white trash." Now, unfortunately, there was a teacher within earshot. And while the teacher did not see, surprisingly, the 6 combination locks being thrown at the back of her head, she did hear the verbal retaliation that Minnie Jean Brown said. And just a little history behind that phrase, "poor white trash." Minnie Jean, while what she said wasn't a curse word of any stretch of the imagination, the history behind the phrase "poor white trash" is something that was created by the white community. That during a time of uplift after World War II, one of the most despicable things that whites would say to other whites is that if you can't make it in this country based off of your skin alone, then you are poor white trash, that you have so much opportunity just because that on your worst day, if you are poor and you're white, you're still better than anyone else, any other hue in this country, and you still can't make it, then this is the label that I would give to you. And so the fact that an African-American was saying this to young ladies probably not only incinerated the 3 young ladies that were taunting her, but that educator. And so it was reported to the office. Minnie Jean Brown was then suspended and was made aware that in her next instance, she would be expelled indefinitely. So fast forwarding, we make our way to February, and Minnie Jean Brown is in line on Chili Day. And Minnie Jean is being taunted by a gentleman who is probably 5'0". And Minnie Jean Brown was fairly tall for a teenager. And Ernest Green, who was watching from a distance, described the young man who was taunting her as a small, yappy dog, one of those small, yappy poodles. And he said, I could see that Minnie Jean Brown was having an issue with him bothering her. So she makes her way through the line, and this young man is still taunting her, and she's getting ready to make her way to her seat, and there are 2 individuals who have contrived to back out of their seats and block Minnie Jean from walking her straight path. And so they synchronized that at the point that she would get close enough, they would back their chairs out at the same time and try and keep her from moving forward. Well, by that time, and this is how Minnie Jean, as I've spoken with her in person, has described it, is that she just remembers at that point that the chairs were backed out, that the chili accidentally, on purpose, fell on the young man in front of her. And at the moment that the chairs backed out, the tray flew, the chili dropped, you could have heard a pin drop in the lunchroom. And then all of a sudden, there was a burst of applause. Yay! And it was coming from the kitchen. The African-American help, who for the most part, the fall and the early spring had watched these young African-American students taunted, was happy to be witness to retaliation of these students. And so it's at that point, Minnie Jean Brown is shuffled to the principal's office, and one of the white students, one of the integrous white students, lets the principal know it was not her fault, that the students were taunting. They backed out the chairs. It wasn't her fault, but yet and still, Minnie Jean Brown still gets expelled, even off of the good merit and witness of one of the white male students. Fast forwarding, whenever Minnie Jean Brown gets expelled, there are little cards that are made that are passed around the school that say 1 down, 8 to go. And for the remainder of the year, the intensification of terrorism towards the Little Rock Nine goes through the roof, particularly against Ernest Green, because he is getting close to graduation, and they don't want him to graduate from their high school. I captured this picture. This would have been a staged Thanksgiving dinner. The gentleman at the head of the table that you see cutting the turkey is L.C. Bates. He was Daisy Bates' husband. He would have owned an African-American newspaper in Little Rock that was well known for publicizing most of what was going on throughout the Little Rock integration. On graduation, Ernest Green actually makes it through. He is brought to the office before graduation and is told by the principal that, hey, Ernest, we will mail you your diploma. You don't really need to attend graduation. You know, good job, well done. You've done what you came here to do. You made the grades. Ernest Green did have one educator that no matter what he turned in, he received an F. And because Ernest Green had a mother who was an educator, every day she would then bring her son back. Because he had a tutor at one of the local colleges who would sit with him in some of the, sit and tutor him through some of the subjects that were a little bit more difficult to him, his mother was assured that he was turning in A work. And so every day his mother would bring him back to school to ensure that his grade was changed. And this went on up until graduation. He's told by the administration, you don't have to show up for graduation. Ernest Green stands his ground and says, after everything that I've been through, I definitely want to walk. You'll note here, there's another picture that is taken of Ernest Green. At graduation, they would walk 2 by 2, one male, one female. You'll see in the picture the females would wear white and the males would wear black gowns. Their colors were black and yellow because they were the Tigers, and they're leery of Ernest Green walking alongside a white female. One of the white female seniors is ecstatic to volunteer and says, I'll walk with Ernest, I'll walk with Ernest. And at the last moment, they pull the young lady from walking with Ernest Green. And so you'll find there's a picture of Ernest Green walking alone down some steps, and then there are a male and a female in front and behind him as he walks. Whenever they call Ernest Green's name, and one of the reasons, just a little backtrack, and I know I'm going a little bit over time, but I'll bring this to a close here shortly. One of the reasons why the administration didn't want for Ernest Green to show up for graduation is because throughout the year there were 12 bomb threats, all of which the students had to evacuate the schools and they had to go through all the lockers. And so they find themselves in a situation where graduation is happening in the state-of-the-art football stadium. And if there were ever a place for terrorism to happen, it's the first African-American graduate to graduate from an all-white high school. And so that is part of their impetus. Whenever Ernest Green gets his name called and he receives his diploma, he vividly recalls there being just an eerie silence, no applause. Ernest Green, it's just amazing how this story all links together. Ernest Green's father would have died fighting for our country. His father was a veteran of this country. So imagine the overwhelming joy that his mother had seeing him literally knock down the walls of segregation by graduating from an all-white high school. The parents were given a certain amount of tickets, and Ernest Green's uncle, who would have served as a surrogate father, was expected to be at this graduation. After the ceremony, Ernest Green is adamantly looking for his uncle, and he goes to his mom and he says, "Mom, well, you know, where's Uncle?" And she has a very odd look on her face, and she steps to her right, only for Ernest Green to see another gentleman whom he's familiar with, but never thought in a million years that he would see on this stage. Ernest Green's uncle had given up his ticket to a Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King would have been in Arkansas giving a commencement speech at the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and his uncle gave Martin Luther King a graduation ticket because as Martin Luther King would share with Ernest in that moment that he saw him and shook his hand, Martin Luther King said, I wanted to make sure that before I left the state of Arkansas, I got to shake the hand of my hero. And so it meant so much to Ernest Green that Martin Luther King would show up at his graduation. There is now this statue that sits outside of the governor's office. So if you were to go to the Capitol in Little Rock, you'll notice that right outside the governor's window, it is this statue. And this ever reminder that if ever a governor decides that they will take the same route that Governor Orville Fathers did by trying to block what equality was granted to citizens, that they would look out of their window and know this to be their reminder. I have, you know, the effects of integration that come about, and that could definitely be another conversation. But I will fast forward, given that I've gone 3 minutes or roughly 4 minutes at this point over our hour time slot, to now share an opportunity for you all to ask any questions, because once again, there's so much to the story that, as you can see, I'm very excited to share this story. But there's so much that goes on. Last thing I'll say before I open up for questions is there are a lot of letters that make their way to President Eisenhower. There are a lot of threats to Daisy Bates. She has her window broken in, a myriad of things. One of the letters that I was going to read to you all was a letter sent to President Eisenhower by Byron Della Beckwith. I'm not exactly sure if that name rings a bell, but it's a letter where he basically shames President Eisenhower for allowing integration, and says, yeah, you know, I don't understand why you would want blood to run in the streets. About 5 years later, after he writes this letter, Byron Della Beckwith will become the chief assassin of Medgar Evers, a World War II veteran, who is trying to get people registered to vote, and he serves in one of the chief positions in the NAACP branch where he's at. But Byron Della Beckwith then assassinates Medgar Evers in his driveway, which becomes pretty historical. But I say that because the threat in that letter that came from Byron Della Beckwith to our president at that time would have been unexplainable in our day-to-day. And it's so interesting, once again, how history links that he would have sent that letter, and then 5 years later gotten to the point to where he was going to take matters into his own hands of what was going on in America, becoming too inclusive by taking out one of its pillars. So with that said, questions about the Little Rock Central integration?
This is Ben Jessup. I have a question.
Please.
What sort of history do we have of the thinking of the parents of the Little Rock Nine? I mean, as a parent, it must have been an incredibly stressful time, an interesting decision to participate or allow their kid to participate.
They're out of the mouths of the nine. There isn't too much chronicles from the parents. and that was actually problematic for a lot of them. It was not as favorable for all of the 9 and all of the 9's parents to have Daisy Bates serve as a surrogate parent, pretty much ushering them through this experience. And there was history of there being a little bit of confrontation around that. Nothing that became very long-lasting, but many of the parents didn't know that their child had signed up until they got news that they signed up, if that makes any sense. And so whenever the kids volunteered to integrate Little Rock Central, many of the parents weren't necessarily put on notice, but by and large, all of the parents were willing to lose their jobs, receive the threats, and do whatever was necessary in order for their child to walk out the year of integration, which, on that note, the following year, Governor Orville Faubus will close down all Little Rock schools, which leaves an indelible mark on the Little Rock community, because when your kids don't go to school and they miss that year, many of the individuals, both white and black, left the state of Arkansas to get education elsewhere. Others did correspondence courses from other states in order to graduate on time. And this becomes the most renowned growth of private and charter schools, because for those who couldn't attend the state-funded school, this is when private schools begin ballooning, and then, of course, the continued mass resistance against integration.
Thanks.
No doubt.
Hi, this is Lori. I've got a question, kind of flipping it on the other side. So for some of the white students that tried to befriend some of the 9, were they ostracized and never to be seen again? I'm just reading something here that Minnie Jean had said, that one girl ran up to me and said, "I'm so glad you're here. Won't you go to lunch with me today?" And I never saw her again.
Yeah, there was, and there's a lot of those stories. There is a Robin Laux, who still lives in Little Rock. Whenever she had a math class with Terrence Roberts, he was allowed to be in the class but wasn't given a book, and sat towards the front of the classroom. And Robin Laux, seeing that he didn't have a book, decided to scoot her desk next to him. And yeah, that became one of the worst things that she could have ever done. There were other kind of students who would aid and abet some of the terrorism that the 9 would go through. Some who would, I guess, kind of infiltrate these terroristic student groups and would call the 9 nights before to say, "Hey, don't go down such and such hall," or, "Hey, make sure you take your books out of your locker after X period because they're going to, you know, pour urine," or what have you. But one of the students who ended up getting found out that he was kind of leaking information came back to school with a broken arm and ended up being sent off to another school, I think in Louisiana. And so there was a cost to stepping up for the Little Rock 9, and they were grateful for those who took on much of the terrorism that they received. But by and large, those white students who tried to aid and abet some of the terrorism that was going on against the 9 said that it was the right thing to do, or that they just weren't raised like that, or those weren't the values that their parents had raised them with, and so they couldn't simply sit by and be a silent witness as the majority did.
What's happened to the Little Rock 9 since? What kind of careers?
I was going to say all of them have gone on to get some level of postgraduate education, whether it's master's, PhD. They've gotten professions in journalism. Both Minnie Jean Brown and Ernest Green actually worked in administrative offices for the federal government. Ernest Green under the Carter administration, and Minnie Jean Brown actually worked for the Department of Interior, our claim to fame here in the National Park Service. She worked in the Department of the Interior to help with our diversity and inclusion in the agency before going on to do bigger and better things, social justice work, rather.
What about Elizabeth Eckford?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
What about Elizabeth Eckford?
So Elizabeth Eckford worked as a social worker. She served in the Army. She is the second resident who lives in Little Rock and has done extremely well for herself. There's one other note just about that, because given some of the side effects of what the Little Rock Nine went through, I'd be remiss not to note that some of the nine actually walked away from their experience with post-traumatic stress disorder-like symptoms. And the thing that I've found most remarkable, having met the nine, is that they frequently come back to Little Rock to speak to student and adult organizations about their experience and how much it should not be repeated. And the only reason why that's remarkable is because if any of you have any veterans in your life or know of any encounters that you've had with veterans, those who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder don't go back to their war site, in essence. And the fact that they not only come back but have frequently come back. I mean, when I was in Little Rock for 2 years, and I had seen members of the nine at least 2 to 3 times a year. And, you know, they live outside of the state. Terrence Roberts lives in California, and he has his own practice, and would regularly come back just to speak to groups of students. Literally, they would fly to Little Rock to speak to a class of 30. And so it is remarkable how much they believe in everything that they suffered. And that is the larger part of their legacy, is that for them, it wasn't just about 1957. It really was their life's work.
So when they appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show with some of their tormentors, were they able to put closure to this and forgiveness, or how did that show go? I mean,
so when I had an opportunity to talk with Minnie Jean about if you go to YouTube and you watch, there's one gentleman who, you know, he's very adamant about being apologetic, and he's sorry for it, and he said, "Hey, Minnie Jean, can I give you a hug?" And she's like, "Sure." And she jokingly said, "Now, what would you do if you're on Oprah and you have 15 million viewers watching, how you're going to respond?" But for years, it was very difficult for there to be particularly for Minnie Jean, because she didn't get to finish out the year. And not only did she not get to finish out the year, but after being expelled, she gets sent to New York, away from her mother and her siblings, and has at least two to three siblings that she's leaving behind, and will finish her high school education in New York, and then shortly thereafter will spend a good portion of her life in Canada. And so her life takes a very different trajectory, and all of this because she got expelled for going to school and simply, I guess, protecting herself or retaliating in a verbal sense, but whether it was, you know, her retaliating verbally for having locks thrown at the back of her head, or her being, I guess, coerced into pouring chili on a young man, of which witnesses say, yeah, it wasn't fully her fault. She from the age of 15 up until now, I mean, I don't want to tell a woman's age, but she has lived a good long life, and yeah, there are still some real effects to the sacrifices that she made. And so yeah, none of that has stomached well with any of the nine. I think forgiveness has definitely come about, and many of them can talk very candidly and very from a more forgiving standpoint now. But yeah, during the time it was, as all of them have articulated, pretty difficult to take on some of the challenges that came about from them just wanting to go to school. Very, very last thing that I'll note around that is for the 9, this wasn't a civil rights act, right? This wasn't a means of activism. They were going to really great schools. As noted in a previous webinar that I did, most African Americans who could not get jobs in the main market were overqualified and would find themselves in the educational system teaching in African American schools. And so black students would have more than likely had a PhD teaching them their courses, but they had outdated resources, books that were outdated by decades, and hand-me-down things. At Paul Laurence Dunbar and at Horace Mann, they didn't have a state-of-the-art lab, something that all of the 9 wanted to participate in. And so one of the reasons why going to Little Rock Central was so enticing was because of the resources and amenities that they couldn't get at their other schools. Not necessarily because they wanted to sit by a child that didn't look like them, or not necessarily because they thought that they would get a better education, but they just knew that they would get better resources that would avail better opportunities. And so for them, as you would hear them say on a very frequent basis, they were just going to school. They saw it as a regular right for them to just attend school, particularly a school that had more amenities so that they could better compete in the marketplace, which turned out to be way, 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 way much more than them just going to school.
So was Minnie Jean forced to go to New York, or was that a choice that she and her family made, or how did she end up there?
She ended up living with the Clarks, the same Clarks who play an intricate role in the Clark-Doll test that changes the whole approach of the Brown versus Board case. And so she stays with the Clarks, particularly because there was a lot of background support going on from the Little Rock 9 parents, the NAACP. Literally, the world was watching as these Little Rock students are integrating this high school to see how this land of the free is taking the quality that they so highly tout. And so those who were helping aid and guide the 9 through this process thought best that Minnie Jean go to New York, where the education was a little bit more equitable. She did go to a integrated school and had a thriving education. If you all ever go to the site, there's once again more information and resources about her time in New York, all of which she to a greater degree doesn't regret, but she did miss very sorely being away from her family and her sister and her brother. But that's how that kind of came about. It was more so trying to figure out what was the best situation so that she wouldn't have kind of a reduplication of Little Rock.
All right.
Very
I know.
Well, yeah, sorry, I'm seeing that I'm 20 minutes over. It must be some good chili.
This has been awesome. I cannot thank you enough for your time, the second presentation. You know I will be tapping you for something else. I could just sit and listen to you for hours. So if there are no more questions on the phone or in the room, we will cut you loose and say thank you very much for your time, your knowledge, and being just a wonderful entertainer, and thank you for your presentation.
No problem. And once again, please feel free. My first name _ last name at nps.gov is where you can send any questions that you may have. And in addition, I would strongly encourage that if you're ever thinking of a great vacation, please stop through the state of Arkansas, go to Little Rock Central. It is worthwhile. The interpretation that's done there, and many of the all of the interpreters who are at that site will give you a full-on experience that is so much better in the resource than I can ever do over the phone. But thank you all for your time. I hope you enjoy your chili and you all have a great rest of your hump day.
Thank you very much. Could you do me a favor and send me your presentation so I can put it up in our intranet?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.